Hi everyone and welcome to our video today. Today we have Mahsa Durbano. She's a sports psychologist and also a mental coach who specializes in golf. And she's going to chat with us a little more about mental coaching for golf performance and also a few tips on how to get yourself ready for golf season. So welcome, Mahsa.
Sure. Michelle, thank you so much for having me here. Definitely always exciting for me to have the opportunity to engage with you, catch up with you, and share some stories. Happy to be here. Thank you. Sports psychology, I looked into it. I came back and I said to him, you know what? I really like the idea of this because I could totally see, and interestingly enough, in the past, I didn't make the true connection because I was so involved in the clinical world. But once he brought it to my attention, it was like a light bulb. And I saw all the connections in terms of how we play transfers energy into who we are. And I can certainly understand why golf was the focus and remains to be the focus today. It's because it is such a sport that requires awareness, sharpness, a relationship with yourself, to be able to truly kind of manifest the game that you want, but understand your tendencies in terms of what is happening as opposed to what you want to happen and how you bring those two together. Yeah.
Right. Well, so we know that you also work with other sports. I know you also work with basketball and a lot of tennis as well. What do you see across the different sports and the athletes in terms of how they perform, how they prepare their mindset? And is there any differences that you see between like playing a team sport and an individual sport like golf and tennis?
I would say definitely there's a lot of difference. They both have different challenges. You know, with singular sports, the level of independence that is required, and for you to be your own cheerleader, your own defender, your own best friend, your own coach, kind of be able to lift yourself on those tough days and stay humble on those high days. There's a lot of challenges when it comes to sports that are, you know, me, myself, and I. And it requires you to be mentally strong in a completely different way than when you're playing a team sport where you have a family. There is a unity. However, then you've got people dependent on you and you depend on other people as well. The ability to kind of self-regulate and be, you know, have manageable expectations, both of yourself and of others, and recognizing, you know, your failures or your challenges for what they are and taking it step by step. There's a lot of differences there in terms of team sports and individual sports. And then when it comes to team sports, I would say that the sports, it's really sport dependent. A sport like basketball, the dynamics are very different than a sport like hockey. You know, hockey is very demand sport, and everyone has this need to maintain this strength. Not being able to show weakness is a huge challenge in hockey, and where, you know, the reality is they're all really young boys. Even if you look at the NHL, they're still very young boys. You may have a few veterans there, like usually the goalies, because it takes quite a bit of time to develop into a good goalie. But for the most part, they're young boys, and they're told from a young age, the culture is, you do as I say. There's a lot of aggression in terms of how it's coached. And it's, you have no emotions. You go out there and you do what you're supposed to do. And it poses a lot of challenges in terms of the actual sport and what it requires for an athlete to be able to fully develop into an elite state within that sport. Whereas basketball is completely different. It's a very cultured sport. All you need is a ball and a court. You know, you have individuals who it's very family-based. People are a little more easygoing. I'm referring to the athletes. Coaching system is based on respect and connection. So the challenges that you face in basketball are different, whereas, you know, you think that it's a team sport, but when you get on court, it's all a matter of how much time you have and how you can perform at your best within those few minutes that you have on court. And you think that it's not possible, but people are really in the zone when they're in basketball. And time does go a lot slower, and there's a lot of thinking that's involved. So it requires you to have a level of self-awareness that's almost like being in a singular sport. And then you've got you've got tennis, and you've got golf, and I'm going to say even like sailing, where you need to be aware of the elements. You need to be aware of yourself within both in a crowd, but really in your own state. And you need to learn to take charge of your team, first yourself, then your team. And just recognize that it is a marathon, not a sprint. And that if you can really have that, self-reflection in terms of what every step has meant to you and how you want to strategize to evolve from it, then you can gain a lot of success. So there's a lot of differences between, I would say, every sport. I've worked in wrestling. Wrestling is also a singular sport, but it is very much a team sport. Singular yet team, and very challenging. Being able to let go of the fact that you may get out there and come back really hurt. I have a great respect for all sports, and I find all of them to be unique. So whether they are team-based or singular-based, I consider them all to be unique in their own way, because they each require something different from the athlete in terms of being able to trump the stage and become successful at an elite level. Canada in particular, a lot of youth athletes are doing it. Do I think that it makes things a little more challenging for them in terms of what they want to accomplish? I think so. I mean, I'm a big fan of versatility. You want to kind of give the opportunity for every sport and kind of figure out what's best for you and where you fit in the most. However, considering that hockey is a sport where you can be happy, angry, sad, or neutral and get out there and still play a good game. But in golf, you definitely can't. Who you are off the golf course is really reflective of who comes out on the golf course. I would say it does pose challenges for the younger community. You're older and you've already become very primed in whichever sport it is. You're not taking it to heart the same way. Whereas as a youth athlete, you're being conditioned. You're being conditioned to how you react, how you perceive, how you feel. And golf and hockey in particular are very different sport. Whereas if you're playing hockey, your primary is hockey and you're playing golf casually, it's a fantastic way for you to kind of and find your zen before you start the hockey season again. But certainly not the other way around. It can be challenging. I personally, in most cases, don't recommend it. I say, perhaps you should figure out which one is the best case scenario for you, and then deliberately tell yourself, when I am going to go to play hockey, I'm actually not taking this seriously. This is just good exercise for me. So be aware of your mindset when you're out there, so that you're not developing patterns, but rather you're just recognizing this is just for fun. I'm here with the boys. It doesn't matter if we win or lose, just good exercise. Yeah.
Now, speaking of that, I know we talk about like playing different sports. That's very common with like the teenage age group. And I know a lot of adults I work with also play hockey recreationally and golf, but not too crazy competitively. So in terms of age and maturity, like what would you say, what age would be a good age to start, or like if they're at a certain level that this would be helpful for them?
In terms of mental coaching?
Yeah.
Everyone's development is different. The youngest client I've ever worked with, she was 12 at the time, or 11. She was 11 at the time. However, she was quite the high achiever at 11. Very organized. I would say above her class in every way, or above her age group in every way. And that's the reason why I agreed to work with her, because I noticed that, she's either gifted or she's certainly in a very high performing environment, and I'm referring to her family, where she's influenced to be this way and she doesn't know anything else. However, in most cases, I would say that starting at the teens is best. So 13 and up, simply because they go from being unconscious to conscious, and they have a better understanding of who they are, and they're trying to kind of establish their behaviors and find that sense of belonging. So that's when they're shaping everything about their perception of the self and the world around them. So if they're able to work with someone who can assist them in not just manifesting all of that based on what they see perhaps at home, sibling rivalry, at school, on social media, they're able to shape that based on some guidance, then certainly they can refine their journey and make it more smoother and successful. In terms of the older group, I would say that a lot of athletes who are already on the tour, let's say in Canada, who come to me, they come with a very specific problem. I'm having a challenge with this. Can you help me? And it becomes, the challenge, the bigger challenge there is that the challenge there is that they are so set in their way of thinking and believing that you're trying to take things apart, the human behavior apart, and then put it back together. It's like being in a museum, which is their mind, and through suggestion, asking, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? If this were to go there, if this were to go that. And it becomes a very long journey where, they want immediate results. Mm-hmm. Because we live in a world where we recognize, we can attain a lot of things very quickly. So between the youth and, the older generation, it becomes the different challenges. My thoughts always are, though, no matter where you are, the moment that you begin and, you kind of transition through the challenging period, which is the uncomfortable period of having to do things a little differently, having to think a little differently. So once you kind of surpass that uncomfortable period, you will then begin to see the purpose behind the act. Mm-hmm. And once you see the purpose, which it should not take that long, you embrace it and you recognize how you think, how you feel, your perception, and your tendencies in life transfer into your sport. And you have a lot more control over what happens to you than you think. The tools are within.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about like for amateur golfers that just play either recreationally or like club tournaments? They're not so much at the competitive level. Like, do you work with also a lot of golfers like at that level? And what would they be very specific to one thing, or it's just more in general to how to get ready when they play?
Yeah, I think that if you're playing a sport and you want to gain the most out of the time that you're investing, then you want to kind of tap into all areas that affect that sport. So whether it's the physical component or the skill component or the mental component, they're all important. They all play a role. So yes, I definitely play, I work with a lot of novice athletes, individuals who are just playing, as you said, the club championship, or just they want to enjoy the round playing with their friends or their spouse. And so that's wonderful, because as I said, I think it's important to kind of invest into all the different areas. In those particular cases, the things that come out primarily is, the fear of playing around other people, the fear of not being able to perform at whatever vision that they have, lacking routines specific to how they see themselves, how they're able to generate information and output it, not being aware of what it is that their goals actually are. So the work is a lot more simple. It is. Mm-hmm. And they can achieve success faster because their expectations aren't to win a grand tour. It's not to get into a particular NCAA school. It's smaller. They want to do better, feel better, achieve more locally within their own community, and just enjoy playing the whatever sport it is that they play. So I definitely do work with that group, and I enjoy it a lot because for me in particular, seeing someone who was facing a particular challenge kind of be able to trump over it and take ownership of themselves, their mind, and their livelihood, there's a lot of pleasure in that.
Yeah. Yeah, I do get a lot of questions from like golfers that just they are good players, single handicappers to like maybe around 15 handicap, but they are always constantly looking to play better and like beat their score. But a lot of times I find people not really understanding like how mental side of things can really help with that when it comes to lowering the score. Because at the end of the day, you're playing against yourself and the golf course.
I agree with you, and it's unfortunate. I feel as though we are very slowly moving out of that headspace, where we're recognizing that how we think
Mm-hmm.
really transforms how we feel. And how we feel really takes space into our body. And then it affects everything from our swing to our ability to be mobile. Our thoughts manifest everything. And so if we just invest more time into how we think,
Mm-hmm.
I think we'll be able to find a lot of methods on how we can better achieve the goals that we aspire for, whatever is standing in your way. And it's lovely to see people doing yoga.
Mm-hmm.
It's lovely to see that people are meditating more, because all these different steps that kind of align you with how you're breathing and finding that stillness in your mind really then further the agenda on your ability to recognize yourself, see yourself, and be like okay with it, and work on particular areas that kind of pose a challenge. So
Mm-hmm.
we're moving towards being able to do that more and accepting it more. But still, it's tough. It's challenging because there's a stigma attached to, well, seeing a mental coach suggests that I'm not mentally stable, that
Yeah.
I'm able to do this on my own, that she's going to provide me something about myself that I don't already know about myself. And all these beliefs are limiting, in my opinion. But
Mm-hmm.
the more people get exposed to all the different industries that are out there to help you excel in whatever endeavor you have, the better it is in terms of where you can go. And I think that there is an opening. Things are changing. In the US, is a lot easier
Mm-hmm.
here in Canada. In the U.S., almost every NCAA school, they have a system, and they have a group of professionals that assist all of the athletes, regardless of the sport. And so, as a result of that, it really trickles down because sports is huge in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in Canada, it's happening at a slower rate, but I do see it happening, which is encouraging. I would say for myself and for you, because what you do is also very, very unique. You are one of very few people in this country that do it. And it's something that everybody should be taking advantage of, because wow, the moment that you're aware of how mechanically things are moving and what you're doing
Yeah.
to assist you, and what you are not doing and how you can make those changes, boom, you start seeing change.
Yeah. And I always also see it as when you can fully control your body and you have control over your mind, it can just keep you a lot calmer when you're playing. And when mistakes happen, you don't get as frustrated. And then because that, like you say, is a trickle down effect, that if your mind starts to get mad and frustrated, it's just going to trickle into your body, and you're going to let the club take over your body instead of you controlling the club. So it's definitely like a big part of how you can perform as well. So last question. What would be an advice that you can give someone if they are like considering about mental coaching for their game performance but not very sure like where to start, or like what they are looking at, or if they are ready for it? What would be like a good advice for them to understand it better and learn more about themselves and be ready for mental coaching?
I would say that it doesn't hurt to just do one session where you get an athletic assessment. I find that a lot of people who are kind of uncertain of the world, and they come with an abundance of questions, but no matter how you answer the questions, those questions stem into other questions, and there's a big confusion. Once they've had the opportunity to just do one session where they receive an athletic assessment, they are able to then recognize, wow, one session, filled out some intake forms, and look at the abundance of information that's come out that is, for the most part, incredibly accurate in terms of who I am, how I play, what my challenges are, and just where the future comes from in terms of what I'm capable of achieving if I were to continue on this path, versus here are the shifts that need to be made, and this is what you will see in return. So again, I always encourage people to just do one assessment, and from there you'll kind of have your eyes opened up in terms of what the possibilities are. But outside of that, there's a lot of great literature out there now in terms of what sports psychology is specific to whatever sport it is that you're working in. And once you open one up and you read it, it should help you recognize that there's so much control that you have as an individual in terms of what changes you can create. And certainly, books are fantastic. Yes, it's not going to give you the full capability because it's meant for the masses, but it will certainly help open up your eyes in terms of what's possible and what others are doing, whether they're professionals or they're just casual golfers, for example. I would say, the third part is really look at yourself in terms of your sport and life, and then try to bring the two together. So, the other day when we were chatting, I said, ask yourself, I'm a fast walker on the golf course. Do I walk fast in life? Am I a fast eater? Do I walk fast on the golf course? Try to see how much of what's happening in your life actually transfers onto whatever sport that you are playing, positive and negative. And if you're able to see a correlation between the two, recognize that it's not your sport that you're facing, it's you. And if you can come to see yourself and recognize, be aware of what it is that requires more attention from you, then you will likely be able to create positive changes in your sport as well. Yeah. So those are my thoughts with respect to that. And, kind of try to get over the big fear. The fear is more yours than anybody else's. I work with a lot of individuals who very proudly say I have a mental coach as well. Because at the end of the day, if the tour players need it or want it or use it, my thought is, and everybody else can benefit from it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Those are some pretty good tips. And I guess that makes sense. Like at the end of the day, you want to look at you and yourself and how you respond to everything going around your I guess around your world, and also like when you play the sport, and also just your life. And that's what give you some answers to this question.
Yes.
Well, so thank you very much, Mahsa, for sharing your few thoughts and tips with everyone. And thank you for your time for joining us. So there will be her contact information below as well. And feel free to reach out to Mahsa and also on her website for more information if you have any questions on mental coaching.